and this incredible Mexique bibliothèque by Charlotte Perriand. There were a handful of these made. These were made for dormitories. Imagine being that student to have a Mexique in your dorm room. Hello and welcome to Christie's. I'm Michael Jefferson and I'm the Senior Vice President and International Senior Specialist of Design here at Christie's. We are in the galleries at Rockefeller Center in New York, and I'm going to give you a tour of our preview for the auction, the single owner sale called Art of Collecting. In the galleries here we have many different niches that we're utilizing to create vignettes to kind of explore in a more intimate way aspects of this collector's vision. In this gallery here we have two works of French post-war design. We have the Diabolo floor lamp by Le Corbusier. This was designed and installed in Chandigarh in India, the really important project that Le Corbusier and Generet undertook to create a new capital in India after partition, 1951 to 1966. The floor lamp is really an incredible object, speaking again to abstraction in design and really channeling abstraction in art. We put it next to a great 1990s painting by Ed Ruscha, and the angles and the lines and the shadows here and having a light next to it has a very interesting language. We really love the patina of this. You know, there's original paint on here that's been worn and chipped and used, but it really kind of embodies the fact that this existed in a space and was touched and used and experienced by human beings. And beyond that, it's a functional work. Obviously, the work rotates and tips. There's a switch here, there's a light up and down. Originally, the work was bolted to the floor. We have a base to allow it to stand on its own. But obviously, it's easy to see the relationship between this French post-war work, having enameled metal, and this incredible Mexique bibliothèque by Charlotte Perriand. There were a handful of these made. These were made for dormitories. Imagine being that student to have a Mexique in your dorm room. But they're meant as shelves for display, for books. They're really kinetic sculpture as well. So you get this geometric composition with the black and white enameled metal partitions and risers, forming these enclosed niches and allowing for a view through the case so that it's not completely impermeable. And then you can adjust these doors here, both to conceal things that you might have in there, but also if you step back and look at it, it's really a kinetic artwork. It reads like a sculpture. It has a composition that is really akin to geometric abstraction. And in fact, the color palette was developed by Sonia Delaunay. And the design is by Charlotte Perriand, as I mentioned, and then the metal parts were executed at Atelier Jean Prouvé. So this is a collaborative work. Again, one of a handful of these that have survived. It's a freestanding sculptural object and a great piece. In the collection, we have a range of work, and we have side by side with the Ed Ruscha a really rare double homage to the square by Josef Albers. This is a painting on panel from 1957. It is the only vertical diptych homage to the square, painted on a single panel, which is really quite wonderful. This we kind of refer to endearingly as the creamsicle, with these really seductive colors. But you can see the relationship between these two disparate works, one created in Germany, the other, or in the United States. He was working in both places, as well as this work created on the West Coast in the United States. But this kind of graduated square in Albers' celebrated homage to the square series, and the graduated letters in Ruchet, speaking to the way that the paint looks in your eye, the way that the atmosphere really kind of draws on, or how they speak to the atmosphere and things around them. So there's kind of an association between these disparate works. If we pan to the right, we then have, again, this Bauhaus, this painting rooted in the Bauhaus, and a photograph of the Bauhaus staircase by Sugimoto. And you can see then the relationship between art history and the different ways that they might be referenced. Sugimoto then leads into this diptych by Carmen Herrera. Carmen Herrera recently passed away. She lived to be, she was over 100 years old, painting in this really severe geometric abstraction kind of vein. But we love the relationship between the vectors in the Sugimoto, the angles, and then the way that that picked up the triangular composition in the Carmen Herrera. That then led us to an association we found between this incredible mid-60s Robert Indiana, number 9, and again, Herrera's geometry. With these two side by side, the shapes in Herrera's work almost start to look like letters, like numbers. And then of course we have Robert Indiana that utilizes letters and numbers throughout his work. What's great is that when you put the Robert Indiana next to the Herrera, the number 9 almost starts to dissolve. You almost don't read it anymore. It reads like something that is more of a geometric abstraction and not a straightforward number that we might experience in the world. And in the effect then of having the Indiana next to the Herrera, you start to see this not as pure geometric abstraction, but as symbols, as letters perhaps. And the relationship between these two, and of course the palette that really speaks well to each other, makes an interesting association. The Robert Indiana then leads into another Ruchet. Exit in this case is very much legible and speaks to the cinematic, the end of the movie perhaps, what you see when you're exiting the movie theater. But you can see the relationship between two tenets of what could be conceptual art, word-based art, minimalism, American art, and then finally to Robert Indiana's stack of numbers 1 through 0, and these are from the early 2000s. Another aspect of this collection is the incorporation of some more traditional periods of design with more contemporary artworks. We start here in the foreground with a really incredible coffee table by Eugene Prinz, and you can see the great materiality here of the palmwood veneer and then this bronze-faced wood. It's really incredibly built with these two tiers. The top is actually reversible with a bronze finish on the other side, becoming again like an interactive, kinetic sculpture in a way, but really an architectural piece set up on these 4 legs. That architecture theme carries us into this rare tea set by Josef Hoffmann. Each of these elements on their own are incredible works of the Wiener Werkstatt and the use and execution of metal. What's great about this set is that it's complete. It really does read like an architectural ensemble. It incorporates glass, silvered metal, and wood, so 3 materials coexisting here. And the great geometry that these works have, this utilization of the grid, which is really Hoffmann's signature motif and style. Then you can take the grid here that we see in the Hoffmann, and then you look more broadly at this carpet by Barbro Nilsson, made in the workshops of Marta Moss Federström in Sweden. This great grid, this beautiful plane of red that allows a contrast in these rich, warmer browns that we have in the furniture on top of it. The most comfortable chairs in the building, frankly, this pair of chairs by Paul Dupré-Lafon. kind of the great Art Deco line, and then really rooted to the ground with these wooden feet that emerge slightly at the corners. But just an incredibly beautiful, detailed pair of chairs. And then we like to contrast this kind of more traditional decor, in a way, with contemporary art, channeling the vision of the collector, and this surprising, dramatic, large-scale word piece by Jack Pearson really kind of holds its own amongst all of these things, really a beacon of pop art, and again, this kind of channeling the cinematic, which was a recurring theme with this collector's vision. But it all works together, speaking a language, you know, creating some excitement and some drama. And it's very stimulating aesthetically and intellectually to have these things from different periods in the same room. In the front galleries here at the corner of 6th Avenue and 49th Street, we have two other vignettes that I want to talk about briefly. Over my shoulder, you can see a range of work, again, from disparate periods. What I was finding compelling here was this vertical composition in the painting by John McLaughlin. He's a painter based on the West Coast of the United States, working in California. And if you can imagine, he created paintings like that out in the open air with an easel at the beach. So looking at the environment around him, but reducing it to pure geometries, a really compelling object. But I found the kind of resonance of verticality and geometry in this really important chair from the Puckersdorf Sanatorium in Austria, designed by Josef Hoffmann. And again, the really beautiful, sensual use of wood and geometry in that chair really was inspiring to me to kind of tie in the geometry of the painting. Another painting of a similar palette but a very different approach is Warhol's Repent and Sin No More, a later work in the artist oeuvre. And I saw an association between that and the great series of flowers by Robert Mapplethorpe. There's almost a textural conversation between that orchid on the end and Warhol's painting. But really, when you see these two, when you see Warhol and Mapplethorpe side by side, it speaks to pop, it speaks to familiar themes that are then transformed by the way that they are executed in the medium that they're presented in. But the geometry even of the boxes and the subtle color of the Mapplethorpe really channeled these, the color and palette and geometry of this ensemble, a group of furniture, again from Chandigarh, designed by Le Corbusier and Pierre Jeanneret in the mid-50s, and then this group of Roulon ceramics picking up the subtle, natural, fleshy pink colors of the flowers and the way that Mapplethorpe printed them, and the ceramics here. That organicism is then brought in with the great floor lamp here by Alberto Giacometti. And then the black and white and geometry is then picked up again by another Sugimoto. And if we kind of back up and look at the whole ensemble, it becomes a room that is, again, composed of disparate works, but really harmonious in its final approach. Really capped off by this important work here, this bibliothèque room divider by Charlotte Perriand. This is a really important work by her, a similar concept to the Mexique that I spoke about earlier, but a custom work of design that Perriand made. And again, with these kinetic doors, this one in aluminum, this one in black, this one in white. So really picking up on the abstraction and materiality of this, allowing you to change the way that the composition reads, the way that the niches provide a backdrop for display of objects, the way that there's transparency to see through the work. She very conscientiously designed it just below eye level, so it could divide a space, but not be overwhelming and overpowering for the room. You can see over it, you can see through it, but it still creates a space on either side. This is the mind of an architect really in full display here. But really an incredible and important abstract piece of furniture, and ultimately highly functional and pretty rare. And the final vignette that I'm really pleased with is this ensemble here. We have contemporary art by, again, a West Coast artist, Mark Rothjan, and this triptych utilizing these vectors of color. These are important butterfly drawings by Mark Rothjan. And then they have a real association, and they have a common language with this really beautiful ensemble of glass from Murano designed by Carlo Scarpa. This work here, especially channeling the geometry and the linearity and really the materiality of the drawings. This vase here has a really wonderful worked surface. It's called a battuto, which means hammered, and they get that effect by grinding the surface, so it gives it a very matte look. And this is all beautifully handmade, kind of picking up the texture of the drawings. The colors of these glass pieces being really harmonious as a group, but also within the context of the pieces that I put together. And they're resting upon another work by Charlotte Perriand, this table from the late 1950s. It's called the Gorge, made getting its name from this little almost pencil line at the edge, but these great, wonderful curving surfaces, the wonderful little keys that support the joinery in between, and again, the sensual lines, the beautiful curves kind of pick up what's happening in the glass here. But really the overall ensemble is one of just pure aesthetics and one of really pure visual delight. So it's great to kind of put all of these different things together in different ways, and really experience art for the way that it combines and enhances itself. So that's really what we're doing here.
Okay, now we have the rapid fire questions.
Okay, rapid fire.
So let's shoot.
What is collecting to you?
What is collecting to me? Well, it is a way of engaging with the world. I'm a visual person. I am an expert in the market, but I am a collector. And I really channel the sensibilities that I have and the pleasure that I gain from collecting, and really transfer that as a kind of open ear and an understanding mind to the collectors that I sell to. It's a way of exploring the world. It's a tactile kind of interaction with things that are around us. And collecting is really the same as life. It's kind of absorbing, and it's consuming, but it's really engaging one's mind, body, and environment by gathering things around you.
Who is your favorite designer?
My favorite designer? I have a few favorites that are always there. They kind of change every day. But to answer the question, it would have to be Isamu Noguchi. Noguchi is somebody that I really always love. Noguchi created some of the most recognizable designs in the 20th century, some of the most successful and reproduced designs of the 20th century, but he also created some of the rarest and most esoteric designs of the 20th century. So you kind of get this accessibility with his work, and then this real, there are covetable pieces that you really rarely see. But he's somebody that channels the kind of culture of the world. He's of mixed ethnicity. He can never really fit into a perfect mold in our history. It wasn't sure if he was a surrealist or an abstract expressionist, if he was more connected with Japan or the United States. But what that means is he becomes of any time and of any place. And I like that his story and that his work really speaks to the time we're in now more than the time when it was developed. But really beyond that, he's a sculptor, and he thinks about design in really a way that is quite unique. And the works are very material forward. They're rare, they're seductive, and just beautiful. So, Noguchi is always there for me. So what is my philosophy with decorating and with setting up one's apartment or various rooms with design? You have to follow your instinct. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to place something and place other things around it and then change it. Really you have to interact with this material over a period of time and change it. The collector who owned all of these works around me changed constantly, liked the way things came in and moved out. And you just have to kind of feel it and feel it out by your intuitive sensibilities, which makes it engaging, it makes it dynamic, it makes it always active and alive. So I really recommend go for it. Put in pieces that you otherwise might think wouldn't go. Don't have a plan where it's going to be executed and finished and that's it. That's a hotel. We don't want that. You can go there anywhere and pay for those rooms. Make it an expression of who you are and your sensibilities and your taste, and explore that, and know that it will always change.